Okay, so today we're looking at Pirkei Avot, ethics of our fathers, the custom, an old Jewish custom, to study the 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot, of ethics of our fathers, during the 6 weeks between Pesach and Shavuos. It's the Chabad custom, as is in other communities, to continue studying these chapters all the way through till Rosh Hashanah. Specifically, it's read each chapter between Mincha and Maariv on Shabbos afternoon. So this coming Shabbos, we'll be studying chapter 6, which is the longest of the 6 of them. So Mishnah 1 reads as follows. You have it in front of you on page 1 in English. Rabbi Meir said, whoever occupies himself with the study of Torah for its own sake merits many things. I'm just going to pause here and comment for a second, and we'll loop back to this at the end. I'll remember, God willing, to loop back to this. Rabbi Sholem Massas, a Moroccan scholar of the last century.
My parents Rabbi.
Oh, yeah? Well, there's 2 brothers. This Sholem Massas actually moved to Algeria and then to Eretz Yisrael. There was cousins, not brothers, Yosef and Shalom.
It was one. Shalom Massas. I remember from when I was young, he always came to my parents' house.
Yeah, so he did some time in Morocco also, but Algeria and then Israel. Yeah, it could be. He's very popular and big rabbi there. Anyway, he writes in his commentary. Sorry?
He's in Israel or
I
Paris.
think he passed away, right? I don't think he's living anymore. But he was in Paris. He was in Israel. He was the chief rabbi of Haifa for a while, at the end of his life.
In Paris now.
Maybe. It's a big family. Anyway, so Rabbi Sholem Massas comments on this Mishnah in his quite lengthy commentary. He comments on the word whoever, in Hebrew, kol ha'osek, whoever occupies himself with the study of Torah. And many of the commentaries ask why it says whoever instead of one. In English, you would say one who occupies himself. And in the Hebrew, you can get rid of the word kol. You could just write ha'osek, which you translate as one who occupies. So why add the word kol, whoever? So when the Mishnah does that, it's often to add to someone not explicitly stated, but is included in the statement considering the extra word kol, anyone. And he comments, it's a reference to women. Yeah, that's what Rabbi Massas writes. Anyway, remind me at the end, I'm going to loop back to this idea. Okay, so Meir says, whoever occupies himself with the study of Torah for its own sake merits many things. Furthermore, he is worth that the whole world should be created because of him. He is called friend, beloved. He loves God. He loves his created beings, God's created beings. He brings joy to God. He brings joy to men, other human beings. The Torah garbs him with humility and fear of God and makes him fit to be a tzaddik, a chassid, upright and faithful. It keeps him far from sin and brings him near to meritorious deeds. People derive from him the benefit of counsel and wisdom, insight and strength. As is stated, counsel and wisdom are mine. I am understanding, strength is mine. So through God's understanding, one gets strength, wisdom, and counsel. The Torah bestows upon him royalty and authority and discerning judgment. The secrets of the Torah are revealed to him, and he becomes like a fountain which flows with an ever-increasing strength and like a never-ceasing stream. He becomes modest, patient, and forgiving of insult to himself, and the Torah makes him great and exalts him above all things. It's quite the list. We're going to point out a few things here, and it'll become more clear as we read some of the commentaries. First of all, the Mishnah opens, he merits many things, and then it says, furthermore, as if like there's the many things that he merits, and in addition to that, there's all the following, right? Another thing to point out is, it doesn't make explicit reference to reward. It says merits, in the Hebrew zoicha, as opposed to schar, which is reward. Because none of these things, as we'll see, are a reference to reward in the world to come, or even the primary reward of studying Torah. But these are things that a person merits almost by the by, as we'll see. Additionally, it doesn't describe someone who studies Torah, but rather whoever occupies himself with Torah, in Hebrew osek, as opposed to loimed or shaina. Again, another thing to point out is the fact that the Mishnah says the person studies Torah for its own sake. meaning not for the sake of reward, and then goes on to describe all those kinds of reward. So all that will become clear as we read through some of the commentary that we have on the next page. Yep. It doesn't use the word reward. It doesn't use the word schar. It says merit.
But it's like the last, it describes.
Yeah.
The last line, it describes what the rewards are. But it
Right. So it doesn't
doesn't
just say the word reward. It uses the word schar
Oh,
or zoicha, which means he merits. Meaning there's reward and then there's the thing he merits,
There is a difference
which are different things, as we'll see.
There is a difference between zachar and sachar.
Yeah. So we're going to explain
The
it.
difference is that zachar depends on you.
So we're gonna explain
אם
it.
אתה זוכה, זך, נקי, מ-
So we're gonna explain all
Yeah.
that. That's what I'm pointing out, that the Mishnah uses the word zoicha rather than schar.
Zachar is something
Yeah.
that
So we're
you
gonna
get
we're
from
gonna
Africa.
explain.
Keep going there. That's-
Okay, page 2. So let's look at some of the commentaries we have here. A little selection of commentaries. So first of all, I actually don't know who the author of this is, Chesed Lavram, but he writes. So al af, notwithstanding the fact that the intention of the person who is involved in Torah, he lishma, is for quote its own sake, as the Mishnah put it. Kaloimar, what does it mean for its own sake? This is a big discussion in Talmudic commentaries because the Mishnah makes reference, the Gemara makes reference, the Mishnah makes reference a number of times to studying Torah lishma for its own sake, but doesn't ever clarify what that means for its own sake. For the sake of knowledge, for the sake of the Torah gains something out of it. What does this mean for its own sake? And there's lots of commentary discussed. He translates comment for its own sake, and this is the most basic translation. Koloimar, meaning ligraim nachas ruach laborai, to bring nachat, pleasure to the Creator, to God. Most basic translation of studying Torah for its own sake, doing it because it pleases Hashem. The loyal manas the kalapras, and the person is not doing it for the sake of receiving reward. Pras is another word for reward, right? The Mishnah describes him as someone who's studying Torah for its own sake. On its most basic level, that means for the sake of bringing Hashem nachas. Nonetheless, he merits many things nonetheless. More than the one who studies for the sake of reward. That's kind of the basic paradox the Mishnah is trying to relay. The person who studies Torah for reward doesn't get as much as the person studying Torah not for reward. Right, which makes the Mishnah even more ironic, giving a whole list of reward for the person who isn't concerned with reward. We'll get to all that. Right, so further elaboration, a similar kind of comment, but he's going to expand it a little bit. Comes from the Midrash Shmuel, classic commentary on the Pirkei Avos, which reads, the Efsher, it's possible, there are two types of people who end up studying Torah for its own sake. There's two types of people who end up studying Torah for its own sake. Aleph, number one, from the outset, he began his Torah study with the proper intent, that is to say, for its own sake, for the sake of bringing Hashem nachas. That was his original intent the entire time. That's one kind of person. The second, Sheni, his second one, he's the kind of person who, to begin with, at the outset, his motivation for Torah study was not for its own sake. He did it, say, for reward or for some other ulterior motive. But because, as the Mishnah guarantees, one who involves himself in Torah study for ulterior motive will end up studying it for the proper reason. So at this point, he's studying it for the right reason. So you have two types of people who end up studying Torah for the right reason, for the sake of Hashem. One who's to begin with, that's his motivation. And number two, the person who started out with ulterior motive, but after studying for so long with the ulterior motive, he ends up doing it for the right reason. So Rabbi is gamazeh. So therefore, to include this second category, Omar Milas Koil, the Mishnah uses the word Koil, everyone, right? I pointed it out earlier that the Mishnah didn't have to use the word Koil. It could have just said one who studies Torah, ha'oisik, as opposed to Kol ha'oisik, anyone who studies. So earlier we commented from a Masas that this word Koil, anyone, is to include women as well. The Midrash Shmuel is saying that the word Kol, the expansive word Kol, is to include even someone who at the outset was doing it for ulterior motive, but today is doing it for the right reason. So he too is part of this list of the Mishnah who's doing it for the right reason and gets all this reward. Clear so far? Okay. A little deeper on the meaning of studying Torah for its own sake. So we're going to look at two comments from Tanya. The Tanya is not commenting on our Mishnah. It's just commenting in general on service of Hashem, and specifically one who serves Hashem lishma for its own sake. And we'll see how deep this intention is to study Torah for its own sake, and not easily said, or easily said, but not easily done. Meaning it's easy to say, or even to do, say, look, I'm a Jew studies Torah, I'm doing it because Hashem wants it, and that's why I'm doing it. That's pretty simple and basic. But as we're going to see here in Tanya, it's much deeper. And that deeper explanation for what it means to study Torah for its own sake is going to highlight the irony that it's that person who's being told is getting this whole list of rewards. It's going to highlight the irony. So the first paragraph comes from Tanya chapter 5. Tanya chapter 5 discusses the unique quality of attachment to God achieved through Torah study, above and beyond even the performance of mitzvahs. And in brief, he explains. In chapter 4, he elaborates on the value or the type of attachment that's achieved through mitzvahs, which essentially is, as he describes at the end of chapter 4, it's like hugging Hashem. Because you are putting yourself into the act of the mitzvah, and then the Hashem's energy, the divine energy, that glow that's from the mitzvah envelops the person. That's how he describes it in chapter 4. In chapter 5, he describes the study of Torah beyond me investing myself in the study, just like any mitzvah, I involve myself in it. When it comes to Torah, there's the added value that Torah goes into me. So besides for being in it, it goes into me. And this is a union, a oneness with Hashem that's much deeper. And he concludes and explains that this is all achieved when one studies Torah lishma for its own sake. And he gives us a brief definition of what lishma means. So he writes, we're reading in English here on page 2. As for the meaning of for its own sake, it is study with the intent to attach one's soul to God through the comprehension of the Torah, each one according to his intellect, as explained in the Pri Etz Chaim. So it's the second definition of the word lishma. Earlier we had the definition for lishma for its own sake, to bring Hashem nachas. Here it's a different thing. Here it's, I want to connect myself to Hashem. So a person feels a deep yearning to connect to Hashem. And to satisfy that yearning, he studies Torah because this is how he becomes one with Hashem. So this itself requires quite a bit of work to get myself to the point that I actually yearn to cleave to Hashem. And the only way for me to satisfy this yearning and desire is by studying Torah. And that is the next level of what it means to learn Torah lishma for its own sake, to satisfy my deep yearning and desire to connect to Hashem. In chapter 41, towards the end, the Alter Rebbe gives us an even deeper or more extreme version of what it means, lishma, to serve Hashem for its own sake. And it comes along with a meditation for our morning prayers. And it goes as follows. It's the bottom of page 2, the last paragraph. This is why it was ordained to recite at the beginning of the morning blessings before the prayer the following, quote, O my God, Elokai, the soul which thou gavest me is pure. I copy-pasted this translation. I don't know if I would have used that, but this is the official translation. So, oh my Lord, my God, the soul which you gave me is pure. You breathed it into me, and you will take it from me. Right? This is what we say in the morning. The soul you gave me is pure. You created it, you made it, you blew it into me, and you will take it from me, and you will return it to me in the future time with the resurrection. Right? That's what we say. So explains the Alter Rebbe, what are we doing here? Why are we saying this in the morning, and why is it so important to describe it in this way? That Hashem's going to take it and give it back. Why is that so important? Meaning, explains the Alter Rebbe, inasmuch as you did breathe it into me, and you will take it away from me, I therefore, as of now, hand it over to you and return it to you to unite it with you in the oneness, as is written, unto you, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. So in other words, what we're saying there is, the whole life is yours. You gave it to me, you're taking it to me, you give it back to me. So if the whole thing is yours, then here it is, it's yours. Right? And how do I give it to you and make it yours? That is through the binding of my thoughts with your thoughts, and my speech with your speech, by means of the letters of the Torah and of prayer. And especially one speaks to God in the second person, as blessed are you,
Yeah.
as opposed to Blessed be the name of Hashem, speaking to God in the third person, speaking to Hashem in the second person. Blessed be you. So this is like a deeper elaboration on this idea of doing it for its own sake. It's a kind of Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh means literally, it's often translated as martyrdom. But Mesiras Nefesh literally means to hand over my life. Mesira means to give over. Nefesh, my life. So Mesiras Nefesh, handing over my life, could be literally, God forbid, we should never be tested. Although unfortunately, many in our history have been tested. But it also means I give you my life while I'm living. And that's the point of this prayer. The whole life belongs to you. You gave it to me, you're taking it from me. So from now, from this point forward, I just give it to you. It's yours. Mesiras Nefesh. And that's what he continues to say. With this pardonness, what's that word? Let's get the Hebrew. With this preparation. Okay. With this preparation to surrender his soul, to deliver his life, Mesiras Nefesh, to God, he should begin to recite the morning brachas. Blessed are you, etc. Similarly, with this preparation, preparedness, is that the right way to pronounce it? Preparedness, there we go. With this preparedness, he should also begin to learn a regular course of study immediately after prayer. We're talking about studying Torah for its own sake. This is what it means to study Torah for its own sake, says the Alter Rebbe. Before I start learning, to take a minute to reflect. Life belongs to Hashem. He gave it, he's taking it. So from this point, I'm dedicating it to you and the learning I'm about to do. And with that, he begins to learn. So also in the course of the day, such preparation is necessary, at least before he begins to study. Meaning, even if you can't focus on this while you're learning, because while I'm learning, I'm trying to understand the passage I'm reading. So it's hard to focus on the thoughts that I'm dedicating my life to you while I'm actually learning. But at least do it at the beginning, is what he says. At least before he begins to study. As is known, at the essential preparation of intent for its own sake, where it is, I don't know what that means, which means halachically, sorry, in the Hebrew, he's referring to the Hebrew is lakev, which means in order for it to be halachically satisfied. He's referring to without which you will not you'll not fulfill your obligation. The Hebrew is lakev, which means there are certain things which have to be done with proper intent. So when do I have to have that intent in order for it to be halachically viable? So the halacha is just at the beginning. Even if throughout the rest of the process, I'm thinking about the actual process, not about the intent, but the intent at least has to be at the beginning. So the same thing here, even though throughout my learning, my intent is focused on understanding what I'm learning, but at least at the beginning, I have the intent that I'm giving my life to you. Right? So where it is, how do you pronounce that again? Sine qua non, thank you. Is before the beginning of study in the case of intermediates. He's referring to bin, and we'll put that aside for a minute. This is the same as in the case of writing a bill of divorce, which has to be done with the intent. When a person writes a bill of divorce, it has to be written with the intent that this is going to be used by this and this couple. So the person writing it has to actually have that intent. So the intent is only necessary at the beginning of the writing. Or a scroll of Torah. If a person is writing a Torah, they have to write it for the sake of the holiness of the Torah. Again, that intent is only required at the beginning. So required, sine qua non, for their own sake, and it is sufficient if at the commencement of writing he says, "I'm now to write for the sacred purpose of the purpose of a Torah scroll." And in the case of divorce, for him and for her, for this couple. So the same thing with learning. At least at the beginning of the learning, one should have this intent. However, when he studies for a number of consecutive hours, he should reflect on this preparedness referred to above, at least on an hourly intervals, and he explains why. Okay, so now we have a deeper level of what it means to serve Hashem, or to learn Torah for its own sake. Not just to give Hashem nachas, not just because I want to satisfy my yearning to connect to Hashem, but because life is Hashem's, and therefore I'm handing it back to you in this learning. This is a very deep level. And this is the guy who's worried about all these rewards. Kind of funny. So let's see. So the first is the Maharal, which explains why. I'm not going to read and translate the whole thing, but the bottom of page 3. You're ready. You're welcome to read it. It's in Hebrew. I'm not going to translate. We don't translate, but just the idea he says here is the reason why to get these rewards you have to study Torah for its own sake is because these rewards are all the virtue of Torah. The fact that Torah, that there's counsel, there's wisdom, there's righteousness, there's honor, these are all virtues of Torah itself. And therefore, if you want to get the virtues of Torah, you have to learn Torah for Torah. If you do it for yourself, then the virtues you get are your own. If you want to get Torah's virtues, you have to do it for the sake of Torah. That's essentially what he says here. Which still doesn't explain why he's busy thinking about reward if he has such a lofty level of intent. Okay? Page 4.
Read it to yourself, please.
On page 4, we have from the famous Ben Ish Chai.
Read it to yourself.
So,
I'm reading for you.
okay,
No,
okay.
but you have to read it to yourself.
We'll focus here. Okay.
In here.
The next paragraph is page 4 from Rabbi Yosef Chaim Azulai, the author of the Ben Ish Chai, in his commentary to the Mishnah called Chazdei Avos, his commentary to the chapter to Pirkei Avot. He describes how the type of learning described here is actually someone who teaches. Because he's studying Torah for its own sake, he certainly is dedicated to teaching it to others. And in so doing, Zoichel Dvarim Harbe, he receives many things. The many things here, right? We pointed out that the Mishnah says he receives many things. Right? You can go back to the beginning, where it says, whoever occupies himself in the study of Torah for its own sake merits many things. Furthermore, he is worth. Meaning to say there's many things. And then in addition, there's all this other stuff. So what are the many things described there? The Mishnah doesn't really say. It says he gets many things, and then all this other stuff. So what's the many things? So explains Rabbi the Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Azulai. He explains that the many things here are all the added Torah that comes as a result of teaching. When one teaches and one gets challenged by students or hears back from their students, they end up gaining, the Torah itself ends up growing much more than what he initially invested. Not just, by the way, from getting physically challenged by students, but just as a teacher, you know this. When you get, if you ever teach, you know this. Even like facial reaction, you could see people's involvement, and that itself makes the Torah you're teaching grow. And that's what he says. Rabbi Chaim, this is what Rabbi the Ben Ish Chai explains, is these many things described. Is that by teaching, the Torah itself ends up growing. Okay, finally, to bring it all together, we'll look at the Rebbe's comment on the last page, on page 5. It's learning that, that's right, because he's teaching, learning for its own sake, he's certainly going to be teaching it, and as a result, he gets many things in addition to all the other things mentioned later in the Mishnah. So top of page 5, let's look at the Rebbe's comment. I'll read and translate to the best of my ability. And this will kind of bring all the ideas we have, a kind of a bunch of little loose pieces, it'll all come together very beautifully. So it says there, but like this, whoever involves himself or occupies himself was the translation with the Torah. We pointed out that the Mishnah does not use the word lomed, which means anyone who studies Torah, nor does it say shoneh, which means to review. It uses the term ha'asek, one who is occupied. So explains the Rebbe, Pirushai, the meaning of this is ba'amal v'yagia, with effort and exertion. That's what it means to be oisek, to occupy yourself rather than just study. Immerse yourself. Study can be leisurely. Osek is not leisure. Occupy yourself is not leisure. It's you're completely occupied by it. You're fully enveloped in it. You're fully invested in it. Bedugmas, bal esek, similar to one who owns a business. But it's the same root word. Osek. The same root word described here for one who occupies with Torah is the same word used to describe someone who owns a business. A balesek, a business person, is osek, occupies himself with his business. He's completely enveloped in it. The person is completely dedicated and completely involved and held by his business. Without anything distracting him. That's the kind of Torah study described here. Or at least for the time that they're involved in that Torah study, they're completely involved in it as if it were a business. This is all they're thinking about. Everything else is distraction that just doesn't make it onto the radar. It's pretty deep. The next one is lishma. The Mishnah said he's occupied in this kind of intense manner for its own sake. L'shem halimud va'isik atzmai, for the purpose of the learning and the occupation itself. Not even studying because I need to know how to perform the mitzvah. That's not lishma. Not even v'sa'odis b'avodas Hashem. Not even to be inspired, but simply because this is it. Back to that Tanya idea. My life belongs to you, Hashem. So this is it. Not because I want to know what to do, not because I'm looking for inspiration, not because I'm looking to climb anywhere, but because this is it. My life is yours, Hashem. I'm giving it to you here. That's all. So the question becomes, which you've been pointing out a few times. If he's not learning, even for the sake of growing in a service of God, because that's even an ulterior motive, he's involved just because it's Torah. And his entire investment is simply for the sake of learning Torah for its own sake. The question becomes, well, what of his level of service of Hashem? Should he not concern himself with his level? If we're being told to occupiers, see, there flips the question a bit different. We looked at it as there's reward, and ignore the reward because you're doing it for its own sake, but you'll get it anyway. They were saying it a bit different. If you're so involved in your Torah study to the point that this is your whole occupation, then when do you ever have time to stop and consider where you are at in terms of your service of Hashem? Should you not sometimes learn for inspiration? So says the Rebbe, of this, the Mishnah teaches, he merits many things. We pointed out that the word, like you were saying, the word is not schar, reward, but zoicha, merit. Explains the Rebbe, by learning in this kind of way, where a person is involved, and for its own sake, just because this is the right thing, and it's because he's connecting to Hashem. He merits automatically many things. It's the natural result of studying Torah is all the things listed in the Mishnah. It doesn't say here in the Mishnah the guy becomes wealthy as a result of studying Torah. It doesn't even say he gets the reward in the world to come. They all describe character traits, right? He's called a friend, beloved. He loves God. He loves creatures. He brings joy to God. He brings joy to man. He garbs himself with humility, with fear, etc., etc. These are all character traits. So the Rebbe is saying the reason why he uses the word zoicha, merit, rather than reward, schar, is because this is the natural consequence. If you're involved in Torah study, the natural consequence is you become more refined. That word zoicha, reward, which comes from the word zach, which means to be refined or clean. Pure. So the natural result then is all of these things. So the Mishnah is saying, you're occupying yourself with Torah without any ulterior motive, not even for the ulterior motive of becoming more refined, or not even for the ulterior motive of getting inspired. Don't worry about it. All of the refinement, inspiration you're looking for will come automatically as a byproduct.
You're not looking for it.
You're not looking for it, but you're nervous that if you study Torah without concern for how your character is developing, your character might, be neglected and in a wrong place. Says the Mishnah, don't worry. You completely immerse yourself in Torah for its own sake. And the Torah itself will give you that character that you're looking to build. Naturally, as a natural consequence. As Rebbe continues here. We're not talking about classic reward. Because the reward, the reward, in essence, is the connection he's making to Hashem by the Torah study. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a refinement, a reward that comes as a result in addition to the reward itself. And now let's go back to the Mishnah in English, and we'll see how, as a natural consequence of Torah study, all of these things come to him, even though he may not be looking for them, but they're all natural consequences that happen, that occur as a result of Torah study in varying degrees of investment. So let's see. Whoever occupies himself with the study of Torah for its own sake. So he's involved in Torah study to this extreme degree where this is all that occupies him. That's it. And he's doing it for the sake of, I'm dedicating my life to Hashem in this occupation. Merits, we translated that to mean, he automatically gets many things. Furthermore, merits as in he becomes refined in many ways. He is worth that the whole world shall be created because of him. He is called friend. He becomes a friendly person. He's beloved because he becomes a beloved person. He loves Hashem. That's the natural consequence of studying Torah for its own sake. First page. He loves his created beings. If a person imbibes Torah on this deep level, the natural consequence is he loves everything Hashem created because he sees the entire world through the lens of Torah. He brings joy to Hashem. That's a natural consequence. He brings joy to others. Also a natural consequence. which kind of tells you something else. If my Torah study doesn't bring joy to other people, I'm doing something wrong. If I'm not called friend, something's wrong. Anyway, then the Torah garbs him with humility and fear. Okay, so this doesn't happen automatically, right? It doesn't say he becomes humble and has fear of heaven. It's going to garb you with that. So it's going to require a little work, but having Torah surround you and having Torah be your occupation will certainly put you in a position where you can be humbled and have fear of God, and therefore take it in, right? It garbs you, like it envelops you, and you now got to bring it in, right? And makes him fit to be a tzaddik, a chassid, and upright and faithful. Here it doesn't say automatically, but if you're involved in Torah study, you're definitely in the position to get yourself to become righteous, chassid, and upright and faithful. Right, so you see the Mishnah divides it between things that are like an automatic thing, where you love Hashem, Hashem loves you, bring joy to the world, beloved, to other things which are malbashta. He is garbed, meaning he's put in a position where he's enveloped with humility and fear of God, and you just got to take it in. And then you're fit to be a tzaddik, chassid, and upright and faithful. Right, it keeps him far from sin and brings him near to meritorious deeds. Your free choice isn't taken away from you. A person could sin if they wanted to, but certainly living a lifestyle which is completely occupied in Torah, you're far away from sin. Right? These are all natural consequences. People derive from him the benefit of counsel and wisdom. Right? Insight and strength, the counsel of wisdom, insight and strength here, it doesn't necessarily say people derive from him direction in Torah study, nor does it say they get from him halachic rulings. But rather, and it doesn't even say that they receive counsel and wisdom, but they benefit. Meaning, if his whole life, if his whole world is seen through the lens of Torah, then any advice he is going to give is going to be beneficial. So if he's asked advice in some mundane matter, and the glasses he's wearing is Torah glasses, then either one of two things. Either he doesn't give advice and says, look, I don't know. If he does give advice, it's because he sees that problem through the lens of Torah, and therefore it's going to be beneficial automatically. Right? And then the Torah itself bestows upon him its royalty, its authority, its discerning judgment. Right? All of these things are automatically, as it concludes at the end, he becomes modest, patient, forgiving of insults to himself, and the Torah makes him great and exalts him above all things. These are all natural consequences. So now, to loop back to what we began with, Rabbi Masas. Rabbi Masas writes, Shalom Masas, that's the one I'm referring to.
And the first what I recall, I was young. You used to come to my parents' house every time they had a fight.
Let me finish and then you'll share. So,
That's what
Rabbi Masas, we quoted Rabbi Masas earlier saying that when the Mishnah says kol, anyone who involves himself, as opposed to saying ha'oisek, one who involves himself. Rabbi Masas said it means it includes women as well. Now, the challenge to this position is that the Mishnah describes reward. Now, halacha says that because a woman isn't obligated to study Torah, at least not all parts of Torah, therefore a woman could learn Torah, but doesn't get rewarded for it because there's no mitzvah, right? And this Mishnah gives a bunch of rewards. But now we have the answer, because it's not talking about the classic reward. This is much better than that. This is talking about the natural consequence of studying. So it doesn't make a difference who's studying. What's the difference? If we're talking about the natural consequence, then it's kol ha'isek. It's anyone who studies. And this is what Masas explains. He follows the same thinking of the Rebbe here. I'm not sure if you read the Rebbe's commentary. It's possible, but he follows the same thinking that the Mishnah here is not describing reward as in your granted reward as a result of your efforts, like a quid pro kind of transaction. But rather, the natural consequence of study is that the person becomes humbled and loved and full of counsel and so on and so forth. And therefore, if that's the case, it's anyone. It doesn't make a difference who's doing it. As long as the person is studying Torah in this kind of level, not for the sake of reward, but for its own sake, for the sake of dedicating one's life to the pursuit of Hashem, then this is the natural consequence for everyone and anyone. So as we approach, this is one of the reasons why we read Pirkei Avot before Shavuot as a preparation for receiving the Torah. And the last chapter is chapter 6, which discusses the virtues of studying Torah, opening with this one. So as we approach the holiday of Matan Torah, when God gives the Torah, we wish each other. Traditionally, this is how the Sorry, one sec. The previous Rebbe would wish people before Shavuot, Kabbalah Torah b'simcha b'pnimius, which translates as, you should receive the Torah joyously and with internalization, for lack of a better translation. B'simcha b'pnimius. So what's interesting is, this is just suggesting here in context of what we're learning. Usually, when you wish someone a good Yom Tif, you wish them something that's conferred upon them. Have a happy and kosher Passover. I want happiness and kosherness to be conferred upon you, right? But when it comes to Shavuot, you should receive the Torah joyously and with internalization. It's not something that's conferred upon you. It's something you have to do, right? Because the holiday is called the giving of the Torah, Matan Torah, but that's God's doing. The wish is that I be open to receiving it, right? So it's a wish that requires some sort of effort on my part to actually receive it, right? And moreover, you have these two descriptions of how it's to be received: joyously, b'simcha, pnimis, and internalization. Years ago, I was in yeshiva in Kfar Chabad, and we were invited to a certain family's home for the Shabbos sometime before Shavuos. And the woman there, the hostess, was the editor of a certain religious women's magazine for Chabad in Eretz Yisrael, Hebrew. I don't think it's still around anymore. Anyway, so she said that she received a letter to the editor asking about this wish, that you should receive the Torah with joy and with internalization. And she's challenging, this woman says, the pnimiut, internalization, I understand, but with joy, I don't get that. How could it be with joy? It's too difficult. Internalization, I get it, but joyously, it's too difficult. And she was putting the question to us, Bachram, my friends and I, and this became the discussion. Anyway, every year on Shavuos, I think about it again, and perhaps this is what it means. When you ask that question, saying, I get internalization, but how do I do it joyously? It's not just the problem that you're missing joy. You're missing what it means to internalize something. Mm-hmm. If it's internalized without joy, that's not internalized. That's just called compelling yourself, which is Matan Torah. Hashem gave the Torah, he compelled it to us. That's not called Kabbalah Torah. That's not receiving. To receive something means, certainly if I'm going to internalize what I receive, it's because I'm happy about it. If I'm not happy about it, then I'm not open to it. I'm maybe compelling myself to do it. That's not called pnimius. That's not called internalized. So with that thinking, the two wishes that it should be with joy and internalized is actually almost a definition of the first phrase, which is Kabbalah, to receive. The previous is wishing, Kabbalah Torah, receive the Torah. What does it mean to receive? To truly receive something means you're excited about it, you're happy for it, and then the natural consequence is it's going to be internalized. Because it's something I'm so excited for. So this wish comes along with a lot of avodah, comes along with a lot of work, and it flows from there, everything we learned until now, which is the person who receives Torah joyously and internalizes it and makes this their entire occupation. The natural consequences is an elevated character, one that's beneficial for themselves, for the world, people around them, for Hashem. So wishing you then, I'll probably see it before Shavuos, but wishing everybody a wonderful day and a wonderful week.
What day before Shavuot?